Now I'm joined as well live by Paul Smith. He's an associate professor in French and Francophone studies at the University of Nottingham. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us. We will talk in a moment about all of that turbulence with the Republicans. But first of all, I'd like to ask you about the president's speech today. What did you make of it, particularly of this argument that he was trying to put that those on the centre-left and the centre-right should join him now? Do you think that's going to work?
Certainly that's what he hopes is going to work. I mean, he made it very clear, didn't he, from the outset that he was making no attempt to reel in the far left or the far right. That was never his intention. And then when he laid out his stall, I mean, all of the policies there, he talked about fermeté, firmness in dealing with problems of law and order, coming down quite hard on French youth. Well, young people don't vote for Macron, so really setting out his stall in advance. I think the reason that he put today's press conference back from yesterday is actually that he's kind of allowed Ciotti to play into his hands to a certain degree. So pretty much what I would expect, lambasting the far left and the far right, and then trying to set himself up in the centre. One or two kind of mea culpas, but essentially talking about carrying on with the policies that he's pursued over the last couple of years.
And it's one thing trying to persuade politicians to join him in this sort of nascent alliance he's trying to build in the centre. It's quite another thing to try and persuade voters, isn't it?
Yes, I think that one part of the feedback that we've been getting since the conference was that it just went on too long, and there's almost as if Macron doesn't understand that when he talks, he doesn't win many votes. He's not a very popular figure. Yes, by all means, talk about building a centre alliance, but you've got to let this election run in the way that it needs to run as a parliamentary election on the one hand, but also when he goes on for too long, he doesn't do himself any favours, and I think that's certainly some of the some of the echoes I've been hearing from people like Edouard Philippe, that Macron is to some extent a hindrance as much as a help. He may speak very well, he may speak very clearly, he knows the stuff backwards, but he doesn't always come across very well to the French public.
Right, and even though this is not a presidential election, it's a parliamentary one, and therefore Macron himself, his name is not going to be on the ballot in 3 weeks. I wonder whether, given the extent to which he's putting himself front and centre in this campaign, given that long speech today, is this election effectively a referendum on Emmanuel Macron?
I think he will try and not make it about that. I mean, he said that today, that the question was asked, would he have to resign if the presidential majority didn't win a majority in the general election? And he said that would be absurd. So he's clearly thinking about cohabitation, the idea of somebody else as prime minister from another political group and him as president. But it would make things very difficult for him. And it's one of the reasons why, personally, I think that the timing is still odd. I know there are reasons why, and he gave those reasons today, but an autumn election on the basis of an argument over the budget would have made much more sense, for example.
And just finally, on Macron himself, before we talk a little bit about what we're seeing on the right today, do you think what we heard from Macron was a sort of campaign speech? Did we get a sense of what his vision is for France should his party and its allies go on to win that election?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he talked about 5 key planks. He talked about law and order. He talked about this idea of launching a grand debate on the question of secularism, la laïcité. He talked about new nuclear reactors as part of the program of environmental policy. He also talked about getting rid of one of the layers of local government, reforming the regions. That was a curveball. We weren't really expecting that, but also, of course, more social aid and talking about helping young people get onto the housing ladder. So there were some new things and there was some sort of more of the same. But this is very much this is what I want to do for the next 3 years. This is what I'm sort of hamstrung over because of the hung parliament that we've got at the moment. So this is the moment where we have to have an election. I'm speaking as Macron here, obviously, and this is what I want to do over the next 3 years if I get a majority, but very much aimed at the middle.
All right, let's talk a bit about Les Républicains then, because it has been an extraordinary 24 hours for that party. You'll know that yesterday the head of Les Républicains, Eric Ciotti, said he wanted to form this alliance with the far right, with the National Rally. Many top officials within his party not only aren't happy with that, but actively don't want him to lead the party anymore. We have a meeting going on as you and I are talking right now, where perhaps his future is being discussed. So, look, just first of all, just your reaction to all of that and what looks a little bit like a party that's imploding today.
Well, it's a party that's been imploding for a long time. This is an accident that's been waiting to happen. It was really just waiting for the moment where that actually took place. Ciotti has always been on the hard right of Les Républicains. His election as president was something of a surprise when it happened. Of course, he was beaten in the primary for the last presidential election, but this has been a slow train coming, and there is a part of Les Républicains that feels closer to the Rassemblement National, and I think that a lot of the senior figures in the party, you see Gérard Larcher there, president of the Senate, for example, one of the most important figures in the party, he's absolutely not of the Ciotti point of view. But there are others in the party who were saying before the announcement of the dissolution that if there's going to be some kind of coalition between Macron and the LR, that would only come out of an election, out of legislative elections. Bruno Retailleau, leader of the LR Senate group, and of course the LR controls the Senate, so it's not that there aren't many deputies, but they're a really important party and they've got a lot of local councillors. So they do matter in the equation. And I think what Ciotti did yesterday, in many ways, it may be the end of his political career as a consequence, but he really made things very clear for Les Républicains. And in a sense, today, Macron was all about responding to that, to say to LR electors, here we are, this is our policy. And I think there will be deals cut with LR candidates get into the election.
Well, you say this, this could be the end of the career of Eric Ciotti, but what about the party itself? Les Républicains, of course, the party of Charles de Gaulle, of Jacques Chirac, of Nicolas Sarkozy. Is the party, as we know it, coming to an end right now?
I think the party's been coming to an end for quite a while it's been trying to hold on desperately to cling on to its identity. It really fell apart in the wake of the Fillon scandal in 2017. It couldn't find a candidate that was electable in 2022. The guy who was supposed to stand, Barouin, announced a year ahead of the election that he wasn't going to be standing. So this has been, building and building and building, and it's been squeezed. The problem for LR is that they've been squeezed between the far right and Macron, and there's very little oxygen left for them to breathe, little space for them to exist. Some members of LR, Christian Estrosi, for example, the mayor of Nice, said years ago, look, if we agree with Macron, let's get into bed with Macron politically. Others said, no, we want to maintain our identity. And there just hasn't been the space to do that. And so they're really now at the turning point.
A word from you or some thoughts from you on the National Rally itself. We haven't heard that much from the party in the past 24 hours or so. But of course, they are at the heart of this story. And for years, they've been fighting a sort of PR war, haven't they, to be seen as a more mainstream French party. Is what we're seeing today, that move by Ciotti, the number of votes they got in the elections on Sunday, a sign that that has worked?
Well, it's worked. It's not only worked because they've made themselves look like any other party. They have, of course, been enabled by the mainstream parties, including LR, but also Macron as well, with his immigration bill towards the end of last year. Kind of fulfilling exactly what the Rassemblement National wanted, or at least part of it. And so that we can go back a very long way into looking at the ways in which the mainstream parties, what were then the mainstream parties, both on the left and the right, played into the hands of the Rassemblement National, and now that it has become a part of the political landscape. So we've got to the point as well where once upon a time we could rely on the Bloc Républicain, this kind of Republican bloc, to push back against the Rassemblement National. For many, that's partly the responsibility of the right. It's also the responsibility of the left. And so everybody has played their part in that. Sorry.
No, I just want to get one thought from you on the left, because they're a huge part of this equation as well. We have this four-party coalition that's forming on the left. Now, can that hold through to the election, just finally?
I think it can hold, but I don't think it's going to make a very big difference. That's not where the purpose of this election. From my perspective, looking at what Macron wants to do is to win the votes is to really seize the ground from the LR, come back with not a massive majority, but enough of a majority with the support of the LR to form a coalition. So he's not worrying very much about the left. The left is going to have to worry about its house. We've seen the numbers of seats, who's going to be running where this afternoon. We need to sit down and look at those very closely. I think the left can hold together. What is extraordinary about that broad left coalition is that even the anti-capitalist parties, the really far left of the far left, are coming into that. That's a very new thing. We'll have to see how that turns out. But I think it can hold together. I mean, there have been problems in putting those lists together, but nevertheless, those agreements have been reached. So once we get to Sunday, when all of the candidatures have to be declared, then we'll have a much clearer idea.
Paul Smith, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.